Hello, Alex.
Hi there.
How are you doing?
Well, thanks.
Good. Hello, Eve.
Hello, how you doing, Eric?
Good. Chris, Brad, how you guys doing?
Good, thank you. Hi, hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome. I posted a little welcome note here on the meeting chat. Um, we do have a question board that I've found to be a bit more effective. That way people aren't repeating questions and it gets lost in the chat. But if there's questions there you want to add or upvote, feel free to do that. We can try to get to those. Hi, Ram.
Yeah. Hey, Eric. How are you?
Good. Is there anyone here that's not coming from Never Search Alone? Okay, I'm always curious about that. Haven't really been promoting this outside of the I did post it on my LinkedIn, but yeah, I'm always curious about that. Hey Leo, Karen. Uh
Eric.
take a peek at the meeting chat. There's a question board. So if you want to pop any questions into there or upvote any that are already there, we found that to be more effective in terms of just making sure that we're addressing the questions that are most top of mind for folks. Hey, Preston. Yeah, let me do that. Oh, Zoom pass is lost. That's good to know, Ron. Okay, boom, there it goes. So yeah, the question board, there's a link there with the code. So feel free to add your questions there and upvote them. And then we're doing a little study. So it's about a 10-minute questionnaire that's going to help us get some insights into job seeking um, and some of the products that we're developing here. Hi, Helen. Okay, I think we got a quorum here. Folks will trickle in. Okay, I've just been informed that I need to repaste this because people won't see it if you just join late. But if you look in the meeting chat, there's a question board. That's probably the most important thing. There's a question board where you can drop questions in and upvote. I'm seeing a lot of new faces here, which is awesome. It is also concerning that there aren't as many folks returning from last week. Maybe we answered all the questions last week, so maybe we're all good. All right. Anyway, I'll drop this one more time in the chat. Okay. So quick introduction. My name is Eric. I run a boutique recruiting firm. Been recruiting for the past 10 years, mostly venture-backed startup and growth companies, everything from executive down to mid-level individual contributors. In a prior life, I was in software product development and product management, working on all kinds of different products from satellites to online ticketing to emergency power units for aircraft to e-commerce and all kinds of other stuff. But somehow I became a recruiter. I've been part of the NSA group now for going on 9 months. I moderated 2 JSCs, so I'm familiar with the process. I don't claim to be an expert, but I'm familiar with the process as prescribed by Phil Terry. I think the community is awesome, and I'm glad that you guys found me here. I know that part of the reason for doing this is I know that especially now it can be really tough to get in contact or connect with a recruiter And so recruiters can be a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of insight, as you navigate the job search and interview and recruiting process. And my goal is to sort of shed some light and help folks get a better understanding of maybe some of the misconceptions or even how recruiting works, all really to ensure that the premise is that a little bit of information will go a long way in terms of making your job search more effective. And so that's my goal, is to kind of give back in that way. So we're doing this on a weekly basis, once a week, Thursdays at 3 p.m. Mountain Time. And welcome to everyone that's here. I don't really prepare for these things other than some of the logistics. So I don't have a program per se. It's really just Q&A. And if there's any topics that you guys want to talk about, obviously I'm here to sort of share my experience and hope this could be sort of a just an insightful discussion for everyone. So bring your questions, pop them into the board, even if it's just a topic. If you don't have a specific question, that's fine. And just hoping that we can stimulate some dialogue and everybody can walk away with something insightful that could positively impact your search. Okay, awesome. Marlies, drop questions into the online job board, the online question board.
Okay.
And then we'll upvote them as well. Okay, Lee, I'll take a look at that. Yeah, no, I appreciate that as far as the response rate on the study questionnaire. All right. So that's just my quick intro. We schedule half an hour for this. If we need to go longer, I can go a little bit longer. But the floor is yours, you guys. I'm looking at the job board right now, and I had a chance to look at this question earlier. Who posted this question? If you want to elaborate on it for a minute.
Are you
Okay, maybe
asking
the person.
about the top one in green?
Yeah, the how much do you agree with the statement that? So I think it has 13 upvotes. Was that you, Helen?
That was me, yeah. So
Okay, awesome.
yeah. So basically there is, I have heard that usually you have a good sense that you're considered a top candidate by the hiring manager if they are very, very quick to like push you through the process. That's more of an indicator that you're considered pretty highly for them. And if it takes them a while, or if it takes you a while to hear back from either them or from the recruiter, that means that they're not, they're maybe a little tepid on you.
Yeah. So this is a really common question, maybe not as you've expressed it per se, but it's really a question of how do you read the signals in an interview process, right? And so I've worked with 2 JSCs already, and I can tell you that it's a big point of frustration, and it can be a huge emotional sort of time sink to ruminate about all the different signals. It's sort of, I was talking with Preston before we got on this call here, and it's almost analogous to like dating, right? And it's possible to ruminate on like, oh, what did he or she say? Why did she look at me or he look at me that way? And it can be an exercise in futility. You just have to be careful with it, because part of this job search thing is making sure that you're channeling your energy, your emotional energy, your intellectual energy in the most productive way as possible. So I would just caution folks to be careful about spending too much time trying to ruminate or analyze every sort of signal, because a lot of times you might get mixed signals. And part of this, I alluded to this earlier, is a lot of times it can be a black box. You don't know what's going on the other side. And so I think my response to this is, in short, I don't know, right? Because there's so many variables, right? And I can maybe shine a little bit of light on what might be happening on the back end, and just speak anecdotally about what I've seen, right? So if the hiring manager is excited about you as a candidate, a lot of times they'll have the ability to, say to the internal recruiter or the folks that are involved, hey, I want to fast track this person. Let's try to get this person going, right? Again, that I've seen that happen, but I've also seen hiring managers where they'll give some sort of hint to the candidate that they like the candidate, but maybe the candidate overinterpreted, they over-indexed on that. And I know this because I talk to the candidates afterwards. I talk to the hiring manager afterwards. So I typically get both views of what's happening in that interview, often before and after, because I brief and debrief with both the candidate and the hiring manager, afterwards. So I get sort of the 360 view of what's going on in that interview, how the hiring managers, presenting themselves, how what the candidate is seeing or what they're hearing. And so anyway, long story short, it's possible for a hiring manager to fast track you if they give you an indication that they're interested in you. Take it with a grain of salt, and don't over rely on what they're saying sometimes, because I hate to say this, but sometimes people say that stuff to all the candidates, right, to keep them engaged. I mean, that's another thing that could be happening, right? Is they might be saying that they're excited about you, which, I mean, maybe they're not, maybe they're not misrepresenting, but maybe there's a handful of candidates that they're really excited about. And so there might be a cohort of candidates that the hiring manager is excited about, and they're sharing that with you because they want to keep you, they want to give you some signal so that they can keep you in the cohort, right? Because that's part of the risk of the hiring manager is a lot of times they do want to give some signal, whether it's a hiring manager or recruiter, they want to give some signal to the candidate because they don't want to lose the candidate, right? Especially if they feel that the candidate's, whatever, top 3 or top 4 in their consideration, right? So by the same token, if you find that they're just not being responsive, and that's all relative too, right? You don't want to entirely write them off either, right? So, so one thing I would recommend as you're engaging in the interview process, even from the first contact with a recruiter or a hiring manager, what I'd recommend is start to ask what I refer to as like these meta questions. Like it's questions about the process. And I know that sometimes interviews are like you don't have that much time, and so you just have to be conscious about like making good use of that time. A lot of times you'll only have like 5 minutes or whatever to ask your own questions, but the meta questions are questions about the process, right? And a lot of candidates don't ask these things, but they could be very insightful in terms of shedding some light on what's going on in the back end. So some meta questions might be, how long has this position been open? What does your pipeline look like? Have you hired for this position before? How far along are others in this process? Do you have another cohort that's maybe ahead of me, for example? And so you can start asking these meta questions to kind of get a sense of where they are in their search. And in some sense, you might even be signaling to the recruiter or the hiring manager that you might want to partner with them in that sense, because that's their problem, right? Their problem is to find the right person for this role and to build a pipeline to sort of meet that outcome. And so transparency is really important. And so anyway, Helen, I hope that kind of touches on your question there.
Yeah, it helps to hear about kind of those examples that you had mentioned from having been on, talking to the interviewees and also the interviewers or hiring managers, and sort of the different things that can be going on in the background.
Yeah, it also depends on how chaotic the company might be, because if they don't have a sound process, sometimes things slip through the cracks. And I guess one thing I would caution too is especially when you don't hear back for a while, it's easy to assume the worst. And so I would just caution, folks to not always assume the worst, especially right now. There's a lot of companies that have laid off a lot of recruiters. So there's a lot of instances where, there might be one recruiter doing the job of several recruiters. And so, yeah, a little bit of grace can go a long way. And for, for the job seekers' own mental health as well, too. So.
Thanks.
Sure. Let's see. So I see one upvoted for 6. when I meet with a recruiter to talk about the market, is there any other prep I should consider aside from the Manukin? I think we talked a little bit about this last week. So meeting with a recruiter, it's important to obviously be prepared and make good use of your time and their time. I would try to find a recruiter that obviously works in an industry that you're most interested in or most aligns with you, and you could figure that out by by asking beforehand in email communication or whatnot. As far as the other thing too is to understand like whether the recruiter is an internal recruiter or an external recruiter. That's really important because the incentive structures are different. Right? Internal recruiters are, they're wedded to their company that they're hiring for. The external recruiter, a lot of times they're salespeople and they're looking to close a deal or make a placement, and they may be working with a number of different clients, and so they're interested in potentially new clients. So if you can give them a platform or make introductions that could lead to either strong candidates or potentially new clients, that's important. And also getting a sense of like what level the recruiter is at. Like if they're an entry-level recruiter, like just out of school, for example, they might not be as in tune with sort of the market needs and trends. Whereas a seasoned recruiter that's been around for 10, 20 years, they might be more in tune. So that's also another important consideration. The other thing I would say is that, when you are approaching a recruiter for this Manukin conversation, be careful not to give the signal that like you're just looking for a job. That's not the time to look for a job, so to speak. It's a time to really gather their insight and their perspective on the market, the trends, and how you and your background might align with that. Another thing that I would say is that if you find that you have a good conversation with a recruiter and the recruiter is credible and you feel like they genuinely want to help, you could also ask them if they can make introductions or if there's anyone that they think that you should meet. That's a good way to sort of network from there. So hope that helps. Let's see, there's one that's uploaded 5. Is it worth applying when you see that a role is reposted on LinkedIn? I mean, it's so easy to apply these days, right? You just easy apply or whatever. I guess my comment on this would be apply away, but don't just rely on sort of the front door to, always follow up with the side door, back door. Try to connect with try to find the recruiter that may be involved with that role or the hiring manager. Try to connect with them. Hopefully that helps. And chime in, whoever's asking these questions, chime in if there's anything any nuance you want to sort of share or any clarifying questions you want to explore. Trying to find that balance of sort of going deep, but also sort of getting more questions answered. Career change, how do you compete and succeed? So this is interesting. Career pivots are tough. As a recruiter, just to give you a perspective, right? And you probably are all already aware of this. If I'm comparing two folks side by side, and one is a career changer, all things being equal, I'm typically going to bias for the person that's not a career changer. It's less risk for the recruiter. It's less risk for the hiring manager. So what do you need to do to sort of, as you say, compete and succeed with that? And the typical answer, right, is you have to find those portable skills and articulate those in a way that makes sense for the hiring manager. And I think that's, I mean, yeah, it's kind of cliche, but I think it's still very important, right? Career changing is not easy. In fact, there's a lot of people that are career changing now because, tech is, there's an abundance of great talent in tech right now. But a lot of them are like yourself. They're looking for their next move, and a lot of them are bumping their heads against the wall. So as a recruiter, what I look for in somebody that's changing careers is somebody that has been able to articulate, either on paper through their resume, through their LinkedIn profile, or in person, how they're able to solve problems. And I want to have some sense that they could be very successful in the role despite not having, sort of the explicit experience in that role in previous positions. Any other clarifying questions on that one, or any thoughts?
Yeah, Eric. I mean, how will you even get past, the ATS and all the screening to begin with, right? Because there itself
Yeah.
you could get filtered off. You may not even get the opportunity to speak to a human being.
This is true. And I think that's sort of emphasizes the importance of networking, so you can get in through the back door, side door, and whatnot. If you're just relying on going in the front door, I read a stat the other day that job postings are getting almost 200% more applicants than they were about a year and a half ago. And so I think part of that is just, it's becoming a numbers game for a lot of folks, creating problems for candidates as well as the employers. But what I would say to that is you really have to get out there. You have to network. Career pivoting it's tough. And maybe part of the question is, whether right now is a good time to pivot in a career, and what's sort of the motivation for doing so.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? Do you consider, so as a lawyer, changing industries, but doing like the same thing, would you consider that a career pivot or a career change?
Yeah. I mean, well, it's a pivot. I mean, it's a slight pivot. It's sort of adjacent, but it's still a pivot, right? So it's sort of a slight departure from, your current trajectory. And and so whenever I'm answering these questions, I'm trying to put myself, what I'm trying to share is sort of the perspective of a recruiter, right? And hopefully that can shine some light again. So for me to champion someone, because that's the job of a recruiter, right? They're doing sort of the initial point of contact, they're making connections, and they're sort of doing sort of a pre-vetting. And once the recruiter feels confident to some degree that they want to represent you internally or with their client, what they're looking for, they're looking to make a case for why you should be considered for the next step, or ultimately, why should the hiring manager talk to you, right? And so to the extent that you can help them build their case, and this goes for everyone, not just people that are pivoting careers or making sort of an adjacent pivot. You want to help the recruiter build their case, and so you want to understand like what they're looking for, right? And also maybe how you might be comparing, going back to those meta questions, how you might be comparing to the other people that are in consideration, right? And you could even ask the question to the recruiter, like, is there anything about me or my experience that sets me apart from the other candidates you might be considering? So it's a legitimate question. And most people don't ask those kinds of questions, right? People ask questions about, tell me what your biggest challenges are, or what's the personality of the hiring manager, or they really ask the questions about the role and the job, but they're not asking those meta questions. And I'm not saying do away with those. I mean, those questions are important, but asking the meta questions can give you a little bit more a sense of empowerment throughout the process, right? You're not just being sort of shuffled here or there. At least you have some insight into how it works.
I just had a quick follow-up question. Do you have those meta questions posted somewhere that I can look into those just as
I
a
don't.
list?
They're just in my head, but I can make a list of that stuff. I appreciate the question. I'll make a note here.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Anyone want to just chime in with some questions here? There's a bunch of threes here. Thoughts on ageism? It exists. Unfortunately, it exists. It exists on both ends, right? You know, when you think about getting out of school and, you know, going applying for your first career or your first job, like maybe people might underestimate you, right? And it happens on the other end too, where people are like, oh man, this person has been whatever, has a 30 or 40-year career, like they have this sort of stereotype or preconceived notions on who you might be or what you might bring to the table. So so on that end of the spectrum, you know, from a recruiter's perspective, ways to kind of mitigate that. You know, this comes up a lot actually, sort of top of the funnel or early on in the earlier stages is about your resume, right? Like, do you truncate your resume? Do you truncate your experience? And you know, if you're going on 15, 20, 25 years of experience, I would say adding experience from 20, 25 years ago is probably not as relevant. Probably, I say it's probably not as relevant. And I'll share with you cases where I think it's relevant, but it's probably not as relevant. Most recruiters will be looking at what you've been doing over the past 5 to 10 years, and they'll really be dialing in on that. In cases where you want to show like the full length, the depth of your experience, where I think that could be important is, you know, if like maybe for a consulting position where years for sake of years can be valuable, because that's sort of sometimes that's how firms kind of sell their consultants to their clients, is like, you know, touting like how many years of experience this consultant has in this industry. But especially if you've taken, you know, different turns in your career, like for example, for myself, like I was in software development for 5 years back in the days, but I took a pivot, right? I actually took a few pivots, and you know, for me to tout like software development, if I'm going for like a recruiting role, I don't know how relevant it is. Maybe it's relevant if I'm going for like a technical hands-on recruiting type of position. But it's you know, again, it's a judgment call you have to make. And I know that there's sort of a lot of reluctance to truncate experience because there's this feeling that, you know, it's part of your story, it's part of your narrative. But just recognize that, you know, most recruiters will be looking at your more recent experience. I would say 5 to 10 years, and they'll be diving in more on that. So having just more years and more stuff on your resume or your LinkedIn profile, it could work against you.
Hey, Eric, I have a
Yeah.
kind of follow up on that. So my history is 20 years ago. I was a professional athlete at the elite level, went to some big races. So that's 25 years ago. And then I had a medium career where I was an engineer. And then now I'm in tech. So I was a civil engineer, so not a tech engineer. So I love putting that on my resume because I went to the Olympics. That was the big race. So it's the most awesome thing I've ever done. So
What did you compete in, by the way?
I was a mountain biker. So
awesome.
It's all over my LinkedIn, but that's what I mean. Like, it's a long time ago. How do I make it so that it's not all about that because it's 20 years ago? But, you know, I definitely want my experience, my tech experience and all that. So how would you, like, that's something I've actually struggled with over many years. Like, this is my third career.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you could do a functional resume, right, where it's really highlighting your experience, and you could have the number of years working in that role. It doesn't have to be dates or, you know, working from this year to this year, you know, from 2001 to 2005. You could just say, oh, I have 5 years of experience working in this role. So that's one hack, if you will, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, the Olympic experience from a recruiter's perspective, that's awesome, right? It's something that is so memorable because it's unique, right? And so I would say, regardless of the years, if you have something that's super unique about your experience, personal and professional, I would find a way to add it to your resume and your LinkedIn profile for sure.
Okay. Without also over pivoting on it too, because it was so long ago. But yeah, so all right,
Yeah.
no, thank you for that.
Yeah, for
Keep it
sure.
in there.
Let's see. How do you, as an interviewer, get a better sense of what the hiring manager is looking for in a candidate prior to the interview, so that you can tailor your response and really align with what they're asking? Okay, so you can get a lot of insights through your recruiter, right? And you kind of going back to these meta questions, right? The recruiter, once you're in, so to speak, and once you've sort of cleared that screening interview, so to speak, more often than not, the recruiter is your advocate, right? They want to see you succeed, especially external recruiters. They really want to see you succeed. And so you need to the extent that you can, enable them to help you by asking the right questions on how to prepare and sort of, again, some of those meta questions, they could be a good ally. So, so yeah, I would ask your interviewer, your recruiter, questions about the hiring manager. I mean, obviously you should do your own homework, but to the extent that you could show that you've done your own homework and ask, more thoughtful, nuanced questions about the interview process, the hiring manager. What is the hiring manager, for example, really liked about previous candidates or even previous team members in that role? Or where have they fallen short? Like those kinds of questions, most recruiters will answer, especially by the time you get to that point. Because here's the thing, here's the incentive, right? Here's the incentive structure. If the recruiter is advocating and making a case for you to the hiring manager, they want to see you succeed, right? They don't want to make a case for you and then you go in there and interview with the hiring manager, and the hiring manager is coming back to the recruiter saying, why did you put that person in front of me, right? They don't want that to happen. So the recruiter really, they want you to succeed. And so most recruiters will answer those questions if they feel that, it'll be helpful for you. Let's see, we could take a few more questions here. Let's see, career change. We already talked about that one. Okay, the next one, Eric, what do you think is the best practice to communicate a desire to significantly change job title or career change and/or company scale on both LinkedIn and on a resume? Okay, so I think this, who asked this question? Is there the person here? Okay, I think this has to do with, how do you communicate a pivot or a desire to pivot from an existing career trajectory on your LinkedIn and on your resume? Probably the easiest way to do that is through your candidate market fit statement, which I believe should be on the top of your resume and then on the top of your about section in LinkedIn. It's a handy way for recruiters or hiring managers, really anyone that wants to help you or is part of the process, to really understand what you're looking for, right? And so I think that's where you would start. Now, how do you make it not so abrupt between your past experience and kind of what you're looking for? That's sort of another art. Okay, let's see. I'll answer one more question here and then we can kind of wrap up. What do you think is the best practice to communicate a desire to significantly change? Okay, I think we talked about that one just now. Okay. All right, well, does anybody have anything else for now? Otherwise, we can wrap up and kind of meet up next week.
I just had a quick one about how
Yeah.
important a cover letter is to write
So
them.
my short answer to this is I don't look at them. Now, I take that with a grain of salt. I work in tech, venture capital backed startups and growth companies. I typically get a lot of inbound. Most recruiters don't look at them. I wouldn't submit a cover letter to an application unless it's asked for.
Yeah.
And if you do, make sure it's really custom, like really custom, like you're really personalizing it for the role and that you're expressing that you've done some research, because most recruiters and hiring managers at this point have been conditioned that cover letters are just super generic. And so they don't look at them. So if you can lead with a strong cover letter that is really like, it's really unique and it's really personalized to the job, the company, even the hiring manager or even the recruiter, right? I think that would set you apart, and that's where I think they would be useful. But if you're just submitting just a generic one that you submit to every app, I would just avoid it altogether.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. I hope this was helpful. I send out reminders for every week, but same time, same place next week, Thursdays at 3 p.m. Mountain Time. All right.
Hey, Eric.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, I didn't get to my question. I just wanted to your thoughts real quick on match score between a resume and a job description.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of tools out there. You can even just use ChatGPT, and if you prompt it correctly, you can get some really interesting and useful insights, right? About what the job description is representing, and where your resume might need to be adapted or changed or resorted in terms of experience and things like that. So that's a fun exercise you could do with just ChatGPT.
So I just started using one of the tools that does just that, uses AI to align the two, and I finally gave up after all the time not getting past the ATS. I'm just getting straight generic declines. So I figure I'm fighting fire with fire here, and see where that takes me. But I just wanted to know what your thoughts are. I have heard people say that in this target-rich market, that employers have turned their match score rates up to 80 or 90% before they even get to a human being. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah. So what's happening on the back end is recruiters are getting inundated. They're getting overworked. I've seen situations where it's sad to say, I mean, not with my clients or anything like that, but just people I know, hiring managers that I know, like they're giving up. They're basically giving up on the inbound because it's so overwhelming. If you have a job posting and there's like 400 resumes plus, or resumes and applicants sitting in that queue, it could be really overwhelming. And you have a recruiter that's in charge of 10 or 15 requisitions, each with their own stack of 400 resumes. The recruiter's it's tough for them to get to it. And there are some tools. The whole ATS matching algorithm, I believe, is a preconceived sort of myth. There's some tools that are starting to integrate the matching algorithm, but they're not as prevalent as people think. So to think that you're just getting screened out prematurely based on some AI is probably unlikely. And so just caution you about spending too much time like sort of keyword optimizing. More often than not, that what's happening is that just the case that I described, that they're just inundated. And so, yes, spend some time, sprucing up your resume, making it hyper focused, and optimizing for keywords. But don't spend too much time on that. I would recommend pouring your energy into going back channel and side channels and connecting with the hiring managers and sort of networking that way. Does that help, Tom?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate you. Hope to see you next week, and tell your friends, and I will talk to you soon.